what is happening in America with the Trump administration is going to send ripples across the world, force people to start looking into how to onboard Bitcoin. Around summer 2023, Oman announced that they'd invested about $1 billion into mining infrastructure. This shows you that nation states are actively getting involved in mining. You can just see it by the hash rate. There is a supply shock. The amount of Bitcoins traded and openly traded compared to how much are being held by long-term holders, how much is available, it's nothing. So really, it won't require that much for it to move drastically up. But there is, because given it's a completely open, free market, Bitcoin doesn't rise like it did in the past, but continues rising. That's how Bitcoin was designed to do. That it's deflationary money. Your value is always going to rise over time.
What is kind of your overview, or like what are you currently seeing in nation state adoption around the world?
Well, I think it's very important to mention. I mean, you just touched it. Is what is happening in America with the Trump administration is sending ripples across the world, force people to start looking into how to onboard Bitcoin. The fact that the most powerful nation in the world is now adopting Bitcoin as a strategic reserve, as a store of value, is significant. However, having said that, I think it's not quite taking. It's sending ripples across the world, but people aren't quite buying it quite yet. I think the news is so much too bullish that you've seen how the price action hasn't been very bullish at all. People almost selling the news, given that's one of the most bullish things that's happened in Bitcoin. But people are talking about it. And those in the know, like yourselves, like a lot of the viewers, a lot of listeners here, understand the gravity and how important such big news is. And there's a lot of developments happening around the world that many Bitcoiners are talking about, and many nations and individuals are talking about. And it's really quite exciting times. Here at Jan 3, for example, we are working on a few initiatives, and a few of them we can't really speak about. But one of them that's an interesting development is in Thailand, and we are working with Thailand quite closely to develop so to speak, a Bitcoin sandbox, like an area where they can test out Bitcoin regulation there. Another Bitcoin beach or jungle, so to speak, and to test out how Bitcoin regulation, how they can adopt Bitcoin as a medium of exchange and also as a store of value.
Interesting. So like it's kind of an area where Bitcoin adoption is tested out in Thailand.
Well, exactly how Bitcoin became into the spotlight in El Salvador. El Salvador adopted Bitcoin thanks to the work that happened at Bitcoin Beach. So this is how Bitcoin works. It's a grassroots effort. It's a bottom-up effort strategy, and really it has to come from proven, tested locations, proving that it can actually work. And this is one of the strategies that Thailand is trying to employ. As you probably know, the former Prime Minister of Thailand, I forget his name. He is I think Thaksin, I believe, and he understands Bitcoin, and we are turning to Phuket as that sort of Bitcoin sandbox. It's a place to basically test it out and to prove if it can work, which it will. That it can then it can open the door for sort of broader adoption, and a way of just showing Thailand, showing the people that financial empowerment is possible through Bitcoin.
Is it Sretna Thavisin?
Thaksin Shinawatra, I believe. I don't quote me on that one. Sorry, I'm not good with names. Yeah.
Yes, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying that because the reason why Thailand is interesting is we have one of our head of business development is actually based in Thailand, and Thailand, about 18% of the population is unbanked, and there's still a big reliance on cash there. And as you know very well, why we're into Bitcoin is we understand the traditional banking system is like slow and costly and restrictive there. So it's a perfect place to test out this strategy. So yeah, it's exciting. Thailand's got a huge population, and it's connected to a lot of the world. It's a great tourist destination. So anything that happens in Thailand can have an effect for other tourist hotspots, and it can be quite promising, really.
And this is a program coming from the government, or is that something grassroots that comes up in the?
It's both, because we're actually there are efforts to work with the government there to create regulation. There's use already. Quite a lot of people in Thailand actually use stable coins there, and there is quite a bit of crypto use there. But we're trying to point people in the direction of Bitcoin. So yeah, we're working with the individuals, private and also state as well. So it's a collaboration, really. Still very early stages, but it's looking promising.
Cool. So that could be a similar trigger than we had in El Salvador, where then all of a sudden the government and higher officials come into the game and maybe pick up on the project.
Well, that's part of the idea, because what happened in Salvador it shows that it's a proven case study, and we're seeing the success it's having in Salvador. Even though we've had recent developments with IMF and the involvement of IMF in Salvador again, but I don't think that should be. You should take that. We should take that with a grain of salt. That's just part of the adoption process. You don't go from zero to Bitcoin in a second, and we are still living in a fiat world. And you're not going to go, even us as individuals, going straight from a fiat standard onto a Bitcoin standard as individuals. I don't personally work completely the Bitcoin standard world. I have to transact with fiat. So we live in a very globalized world. We're still connected very much to fiat. So this process is never going to be immediate. It's going to take time. There's going to be peaks and troughs. So looking at El Salvador is still a great case study of what the success of President Bukele's administration has done there. So yeah, I think that can be replicated in many parts, and it has to start with actual small projects. I mean, obviously, top down is what we're looking at. That's what Jan 3 is focused on as well. But bottom up is how Bitcoin works. So small projects like that lead to big things, big changes.
Yeah, and I always bring that example of my podcast I talk only about Bitcoin. I have only Bitcoins, only sponsors. Bitcoiners are working with me on the podcast for the post-production. And still I have to transact with fiat. So I have fiat income. Also, I have to transact sometimes with suppliers with fiat. So I would be kind of an easy prime example of being Bitcoin only. But the podcast wouldn't just be part. Even the Riverside app right now, I cannot pay them directly in Bitcoin. So there's a lot of barriers still, and the fiat network system and the fiat network is so big that it's kind of hard, even for someone so ingrained in Bitcoin, to be Bitcoin only. That's like it's just impossible at that point.
Yes, I mean, it's quite idealistic to think that we can go jump straight into a Bitcoin standard. Maybe it's easier for some people in some parts of the world if you live in a jurisdiction that allows what that is more Bitcoin friendly. But for example, for myself, where I live in Serbia, there's not many vendors that actually use Bitcoin. There is a lot of people that own Bitcoin here, but regulations, I want to say they're negative towards Bitcoin. They recognize Bitcoin, but we still have capital gains tax here, and in general, it's not widely adopted like in other parts in Europe, like for example Switzerland or Czech Republic. So yeah, it's tough. I would love to be working in a Bitcoin standard world, but we're still very far away from that. But we're working towards that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you mentioned it, how do you look at the El Salvador IMF deal? A lot of people are very frustrated with that. I don't like. I was personally in El Salvador, and also for me, there were no vendor forced to adopt Bitcoin. I tried to pay with Bitcoin, so it was not that much possible anyway. So I don't know what's the big deal with that.
Yeah, I mean, El Salvador, as I touched on before, it's it's difficult to go from fiat straight to a Bitcoin standard, even though they're giving the option to people to use US dollar and to use Bitcoin. It's going to be difficult to get everyone on board at working on Bitcoin. It's going to take time, and I think El Salvador did some great moves, some great steps there. But I think part of the issue with El Salvador was rushing it as well with the Chivo wallet. And actually, maybe this IMF thing comes with a silver lining that it's a way of actually phasing out Chivo and actually using more private wallets to power the adoption. The centralization of Chivo maybe wasn't working out. I won't go into the details. I'm not very technical to go into that, but you got to look at the positives over here. And I think the IMF maybe want El Salvador maybe even just played the IMF to some respect, that it's a way of getting a cheaper loan that they couldn't have gotten if they hadn't adopted Bitcoin. So El Salvador used the IMF to get a cheap loan to further develop their country. So the IMF maybe needs El Salvador more than El Salvador needs the IMF. You've got to look at it that way as well. And I mean, the changes to the Bitcoin law aren't that grave at all. It's still accepted. It might not be legal tender as it was before, but it's still accepted. You can still use it. There's no capital gains tax on it. It's completely free to use. And I think that's good enough for now. So I'm still very bullish about El Salvador. And yeah, I think it was, we're going to have some teething problems when you jump into a new system, so to speak. And nothing's going to go hit the ground running perfectly. So it's going to take time, and we're figuring things out. But I think it's good that people are worried about it, because it shows that we care. And a lot of people have relocated to El Salvador for the reason that because of Bitcoin adoption. So naturally, these people are worried that what does it mean for their existence in El Salvador if Bitcoin is being challenged? But I don't think Bitcoin's been challenged at all. I think it's very clear that Bukele is very much into Bitcoin. He understands Bitcoin, and he sees the future in Bitcoin. But obviously, there's teething problems, and these things will be ironed out in the future. So I'm very positive about El Salvador.
And there's no changes also to them buying Bitcoin. I heard something that there might be, but I still see naive stacking on Twitter.
I still see them stacking. There was some talk about them not being able to stack anymore. That was part of the IMF deal. But I'm not too sure. I'm not that clued up on that part. But I think they were still stacking until very recently. So you can it can be tracked. It can be tracked online anyway. So maybe the viewers can update us on that one.
Yeah, it's always great because they put the public address there, so you can actually see if this is stacking, if they sell it.
Beauty about Bitcoin is the transparency of it. Sometimes they can go, even when before the IMF, the new IMF loan, there was sometimes maybe 10 days, 2 weeks away they wouldn't stack, and then after that, all of a sudden you could see them stack 20, 30, 40, 50 coins in a day or something like that. So I don't know. I haven't checked on it recently, but maybe it's time that we do check on that.
It would be also weird if the IMF now says to El Salvador, you cannot stack, while the USA just said they are now stacking Bitcoin.
Right. That's true.
That would be weird timing.
Well, here's the thing. So maybe there might be something in the new law that prohibits them from stacking directly, but there's other ways of stacking Bitcoin. You don't have to buy it directly from the government. Doesn't have to stack directly. There's other neutral strategies that you can use. You can use your energy capacity. You can use fees on wallet. You can use a lot of stuff to stack Bitcoin.
Yeah, like Bhutan did since I think like 2019 or something like that.
Oh yes. Well, Bhutan apparently has more Bitcoin than El Salvador.
Yeah, I also heard, and it's crazy because if I got the Bhutan story correct, they are using Bitcoin mining since 2019 to stack Bitcoin, and they only announced that in 2024, if I'm correct. And if that's true, my question is like, how many more countries already do that we just don't know about?
Oh, right. I mean, one thing is that it's for sure that other countries that we don't know about are stacking Bitcoin or are getting involved in Bitcoin in projects, because we're hearing every now and then new stories like the one that happened in Bhutan. Also, if you remember 2 years ago in Oman, around summer 2023, Oman announced that they'd invested about $1 billion into mining infrastructure, given their energy capacity there. So this shows you that the nation states are actively getting involved in mining. You can just see it by the hash rate. That hash rate is always booming, always skyrocketing, and you got to wonder where that hash rate comes from. It doesn't just come from the private sector. You got to have to wonder that a lot of that is probably coming from nation state adoption that we're probably not fully aware of. When people talk about nation state adoption, a lot of them people think about store of value and maybe medium of exchange, but really, I think the biggest adoption is happening in mining.
Interesting. It makes you wonder, if you look at all the things that are currently going on with smaller countries. Like Bhutan is a very small country. It's like half the size of Vienna. Then like El Salvador is kind of the size of Austria, but also still small. But then there's America that is now doing things, and there are talks with other nations. It feels like it's actually happening. And if you just zoom back like 5 years, it would be so crazy to even talk about nation state adoption with a small nation. And now we are having America in the game. What do you think is missing for people to go like, oh, like this is hyper Bitcoinization is actually happening, and like the price is rippling and the adoption is growing?
I think one thing that's maybe the people talking about it, but I'm not really seeing this, is the association with Bitcoin and Trump. I think that's holding back a lot of people, given that Trump is not very popular with a lot of people around the world. And I have to admit that, 10 years ago, when Trump first came about into politics, I wasn't very keen about Trump. But obviously, my views changed given what he's doing and what he's given that I woke up to a lot of things over the last 5-6 years. That I'm seeing Trump in a different light. And I think many people are still stuck in what the mainstream talk about Trump. You know the story. So the association with Trump and Bitcoin is maybe what's damaging. I say people accepting Bitcoin in a positive light, and obviously that's very flawed because Bitcoin doesn't really care about politicians. So it's just the fact that there's one politician that's actually caring about Bitcoin and seeing its potential, and sadly that one politician is not well received around the world is going to impede in some adoption. But I don't see it as much of an obstacle. But I have to note that within some friendship circles that I have still in the West in Western parts of the world, since I moved to Serbia 5 years ago, I have a lot of friends in the UK and Spain and stuff. And given the sentiment is very anti-Trump there, the sentiment is still very anti-Bitcoin. And I think that does play a small factor. But some of them, even they are anti-Trump, are holding Bitcoin or other cryptos to some extent. So I think that's just going to be a short-term thing. And maybe that's probably one of the reasons why we're not seeing such big movements in the retail market, people talking about it, the mainstream media talking about it, because they're probably actively trying to suppress it, is to talk about Bitcoin on the mainstream stage for obvious reasons. So yeah, it's just maybe I'm just sort of thinking out loud over here. Maybe that's one of the reasons why we're not seeing the rush in retail at the moment like we would see in 2021 or even 2017. But I think it's bound to happen. I mean, just look at the Google searches for Bitcoin. It's not what they're still way below what they were in 2021 or even before Trump took office. So I think there will be a point where people will pick up on it. And I think price is always the one that makes people move. When they see Bitcoin move and it goes over 100,000, maybe people start picking up on it. But then at the same time, people probably also think that, yeah, $100,000 Bitcoin is very expensive. So I think it's a few things working there.
Absolutely. I just want to bring that up because I think it's always great. I mean, there's always also that factor that less and less people Google nowadays with AI, but I think it's still a very valid thing to show here, the Google trends, and it's super interesting when you look at those levels we had in 2021. Not even when we reached 100K around that time, we didn't even come close. We came like 64% there, and the price was like, I don't know, 30% higher or like something like that. So there was a massive price difference, but the Google trends in the retail market didn't have the same hype. And it was an interesting time also for me because like Christmas is usually a time where people come back to their families and go on round tables where more people are involved that you probably haven't seen the whole of the year, and nobody cared about Bitcoin at all. And I was like, it's like it's a side topic that people say, oh no, it uses too much energy.
Yeah, that's it. That people still stuck with a lot of the old FUD. I think another thing that was detracted away from any sort of Bitcoin hype is AI. That's come in now. Big. It came in big 2023, 2024. Yeah, there's more talk. I'm hearing more talk about AI than Bitcoin. Bitcoin seems to be yesterday's news, which in a way I think is positive because it shows that it's there. It's established. Maybe the hype around it is not is a good thing. And we're starting to see now that because a lot of people are got into Bitcoin to try and make money, like a quick get rich quick scheme. That's not really the case anymore, given that also a lot of the other cryptos, all the altcoins, shitcoins are failing, and we're seeing that they are all not doing too great. I mean, people aren't that interested in that anymore. And now that Bitcoin network is growing steadily, is always growing, is always being adopted. That it shows that it's somewhat less volatile as it was before adoption. It's not adoption, like how to describe this? That it's not as hyped as it used to be, and people are more accustomed to Bitcoin doing what it's doing right now. Not saying that it's not going to go through another hype and it's going to go through another mania, but I think now we're not going to see that the peaks that we did in 2017 and maybe even 2021. Although I'm very bullish, and I will see the price of Bitcoin is going to reach over. It's going to get close to $1 million at some point, but it's going to always rise. But maybe not like the peaks and thrusts that we used to get in the past.
It's super interesting because I think 2017 was the last really huge mania where like you couldn't get out of house without talking about Bitcoin almost. And this was actually the first year where I also heard about Bitcoin. It was just like everyone was talking about it, at least in my circles. Is that something where, and you talked about it a little bit now, but is it something that we might see again if we have like a suddenly phase, or is this just now, is Bitcoin already too established basically that people are like, yeah, of course Bitcoin goes up. Like I've seen it from like 5,000 to 50,000. Now it goes from 80,000 to maybe 500,000, and people are like, oh, it goes up. I don't know. I don't like it still.
Well, I think the other thing is that we're going to have to talk about is price suppression as well. I think that's, even though everyone talks about that that Bitcoin is, that there will be a supply shock, and I think there is a supply shock. The amount of Bitcoins traded and openly traded compared to how much are being held by long-term holders, how much is available it's nothing. So really, it won't require that much for it to move drastically up. But there is, because given it's a completely open free market, that even with regulations around the world trying to impose on it, it won't stop doing what it's doing. People are able to control the market to some extent. So maybe that's what acted on the 2021 market. That's what suppressed its price from jumping too high up. I think that we could get that again in 2025, but I think that there will be one point where it will run away. It has to run away. You can't, you can't control it forever. So you will get maybe Samson Mao's Omega candle, and you will get a green candle that's just going to destroy everything. But I'm remaining cautious, and I'm going to say that I don't know when that's going to happen. I'm going to say I'm hopeful it will happen at some point. But I'm very happy that that where the price is today, and I think it's just going to continue growing. And even if it means that that Bitcoin doesn't rise like it did in the past, but continues rising, that's how Bitcoin was designed to do. That it's deflationary money, and it's always going to rise. Your value is always going to rise over time.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's also I get that comment, I think, since 1-2 weeks on a very regular basis, that people are basically frustrated or saying that the price is suppressed by big players. They usually mention BlackRock and Coinbase, but sometimes also other companies. But BlackRock and Coinbase is still usually those who come in there. Obviously, because Coinbase, I saw a statistic, they hold like over 2 million Bitcoin, if that's correct. Please don't quote me on that, but some crazy amount that they hold, and BlackRock and ETF holders, of course, also, and they usually store it at Coinbase. Do you think that there's actually something happening? I mean, FTX, we know they had a lot less Bitcoin than they actually claim to have, and it's a real possibility for those players short term to do that.
Well, if there is something happening, they're hiding it quite well. Maybe there's some of us out there who are more in tune to what's going on and able to analyze that better. But I don't want to be the one to say that there's definitely some naughty business. But given the incentive structure to do, given the fiat incentive structure that we still live under, you have to entertain the idea that there is some naughty activities happening that are suppressing the price, and meaning that some of the big players can actively get their hands on more Bitcoin at cheaper prices. And one thing I have to note, that given at Jan 3 we do have an OTC, and we have we are buying and selling Bitcoin. There's a lot of private individuals that are actively stacking a lot of Bitcoin right now, and we hear on the wider market there's a lot of people, a lot of institutions and big private individuals that are buying more so than they did in the past. So demand is growing all the time, yet the price is not really moving that much. So you have to definitely entertain the idea that there is some suppression going on. But as I said before, you can't suppress it forever, and there will be a point where it'll run away.
Is there a shift happening from retail driven market to like institutional driven market?
Well, you see it right now with strategy, formerly known as MicroStrategy, with all the new products that they're coming out with. It's incredible what they're doing. I don't want to comment on it because I'm not that in tune to exactly how they're doing it, but it shows you that institutional adoption is definitely there. You can see many more institutions around the world adopting Bitcoin, and that number is growing all the time. All you have to do is go into Twitter and just see a lot of people are talking about it. It's amazing to see. Obviously, it's not the right sort of institution we Bitcoiners like to see. We like to see individuals adopting Bitcoin, but I think that's happening all the time. And maybe just people aren't talking about it as much. But what hypes people up is seeing big players, institutions, nation states and stuff wanting to adopt it, because that seems to be like the bullish news, and that's what's going to drive price. And at the end of the day, when you see price movements, what drives more adoption? Because at the end of the day, we all care about the number go up.
Yeah, but I always laugh at people when they complain of who buys Bitcoin. They're like, "Oh, I don't like this. The big institutions buy Bitcoin." Bitcoin is for everyone. Even if you don't agree with it, even if you don't like it. Yes, we want the single moms, we want the families, we want the people that actually need Bitcoin to buy Bitcoin before the institutions. But history shows that usually the people that research deeply, the people that have the smart money, are usually quicker on those. And Bitcoin is actually kind of magical, where retail had such a long time where they can already accumulate with like 10, 15 years before institutions really came to Bitcoin. And it's like, yeah, if you're still not into Bitcoin, your fault.
Right. But you can see in the statistics that the vast majority of Bitcoin out there is held by individuals. We don't know exactly who it is, but you can see that the known coins out there, that institutions and nation states only account for, don't quote me on here, but maybe 10, 15, 20% of actual Bitcoin supply out there. So the vast majority is held in retail hands. And you can't say that for fiat, because in fiat, it's the other way around. Retail holds a very small percentage, whereas the big players, we don't know they own the vast majority, the vast quantity of fiat out there, and it's always expanding. And people say that Bitcoin's unfair. It's the other way around.
It's a good point that always comes up of like, oh, like Bitcoin, it's so unfair that there's like OGs in Bitcoin. And it's like, really? Did you ever look at the fiat system?
Exactly. And that was that one EU paper, ECB paper, I should say, that came out around October last year. And there was a good rebuttal to that paper done by who was it who did that? It was and the Freddie New for UK Bitcoin policy, and who is that? I forget who was. Don't quote me. I completely forgot the other two, but they made a very good rebuttal of that ECB paper. That was basically, they were still hitting on old FUD, as you said. Like, concentration of Bitcoin is a problem, and it means that those old Gs who are in Bitcoin are going to be better off than your new adopters, new people who get into Bitcoin. And they make clever arguments like that, but easily debunked at the end of the day. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you own the most amount of Bitcoin. The person with the most amount of Bitcoin plays by the same rules as the person with the least amount of Bitcoin.
Let's take a break for a moment and appreciate the beauty that Coin Vigilante has made with the Bitcoin watches. Those watches are the most amazing, the most elegant way of showing that you are a true Bitcoiner. And Coin Vigilante just dropped a completely new and amazing Genesis edition of their watch collections. You have the date of the first ever mined Bitcoin block in there, and of course also the block height and which epoch we are currently in. I love the level of detail they put in this masterpiece. Make sure to check out those amazing Coin Vigilante timepieces down in the descriptions. I love those watches so much. And now, if you have Bitcoin, I really do hope that you don't have it on exchange. But if you do have it on exchange, I have two ways for you to deal with that. The first way is you put it on a hardware wallet. That's the entry for you to get into the self-custody game. I recommend BitBox, Bitcoin only edition, for that. It's a super simple and secure way. And if you check out the link in the description, you even get 5% off if you use the code Robin. And the second way is the Bitcoin Way. The Bitcoin Way is your all-in partner in terms of how to get the most out of your sovereignty. They will personalize for you a self-custody setup that is perfect for your individual situation. They will show you how you can secure your own devices. Securing your Bitcoin is not enough. You also have to keep all your devices secure. One topic that is overlooked often is the inheritance plan. What happens with your Bitcoin once you are no longer here? Do you have a plan for that in place already? And last but not least, if you're in jurisdictions where you don't feel safe, it's better to get a plan B. For all that, head over to thebitcoinway.com/Robin to get a 30-minute free call. And just a quick side note, I will be for the first time ever speaking at the Bitcoin Prague event in June. It will be absolutely legendary, and I'm really looking forward to seeing all of you there. You can get your ticket in the link down in the description of Bitcoin BTC Prague. And very important, use code Robin to get 10% off your ticket. I'm really looking forward seeing you there. And it's from the ECP, the paper. I looked at that, and it for me it is kind of an, how should I say it? It's kind of, they acknowledge that Bitcoin isn't going away, and now they try to attack the holders and taxing them in the future, and already preparing that narrative of like, because we know Bitcoin will go up and the hodlers will get a lot of wealth from that. Let's make sure we say it's unfair already now, so we can more easily tax them in the future. That's kind of the narrative, or the theory that I got from that. And it was just a paper where they also wrote that the 10 million price of Bitcoin somehow in there. That was great, crazy for me.
I've got the names over here. It's Murray Rudd, Alan Farrington, and Freddie New, and Dennis Porter. And the ECB paper was basically doing the old attacking, criticizing BT's volatility, lack of productive contribution, wealth concentration, and they were trying to advocate for CBDCs, which is another thing that we can touch on a little bit right now. There were some recent developments that the ECB Lagarde was signaling that later this year there will be a CBDC adopted in the European Union, which I got to say that I don't think it's going to happen, because people understand. I think even the retail market, a lot of people who don't really understand Bitcoin will see something like CBDCs and will associate it to something Chinese, something like social credit scoring, and should automatically be repelled by it. I'm not getting my hopes up too much about it, but I think that we as humans are very well aware of that attempt on absolute control. So I'm not too scared by it as I was before in the past. And I think maybe the general public are more aware and a little bit more educated about what cryptos are. Obviously, they're not fully educated. Otherwise, everyone will be understanding what Bitcoin, what it is and what it entails. But I think now that CBDCs, that Bitcoiners and people who are very anti CBDCs have done such a good job vocalizing what the dangers are of CBDCs, I think it's now that information has hit the general retail market better than it was, than it was maybe 3-4 years ago.
And if you just see how many more Bitcoin only content creators there are now, how many more Bitcoin only companies there are, the whole market really transformed in the last 3-4 years. And yeah, Murray Rudd is a great guy. He even he sent me this actually in the morning. He's taking podcasts and making summaries and learnings from that. And one of the podcasts he does it with is actually this podcast. And I never saw that. And he sent it to me in the morning, and he did it since the last like months. And he had like 50 podcast episodes of mine and distilled them. So I think he's doing a really good thing of like diving deeper into topics. And Murray Rudd is, I can highly recommend this guy.
I didn't know that. I got to look into that. That sounds really useful.
Oh yeah, wait, I can maybe quickly show this if people are interested in that. He calls it it's murrayrudd.pro, and he calls it the Bitcoin distillery. And for example, with my podcast, he's just diving into the episodes. And then you can just click on the episodes. For example, this was the one where we dived into the idea that John Nash might be Satoshi Nakamoto. and you have the summary, some key points, and then he really tries to get deeper into the topic. And especially if you don't have like I also thought along about if I should do that, because some people say like, oh, I don't have time 1-2 hours to watch every day an episode. But it would be great to have like a 10-minute or 5-minute update from that to see if there's something interesting in there, and then you can dive deeper.
Well, this is something that's very useful to a lot of us who are very busy, who have families, who don't have much time. And there's so much information, so many podcasts out there, so many good podcasts like yourself. That's a really good tool.
Absolutely.
I'm going to use that. Thank you very much. Thank you, Robin. Thank you, Murray, for that. That's really useful.
Yeah, he does a great job. I just looked at it today and I was like, oh, that's really nice. I'm actually fascinated how people take the podcast and do things with it. There are some people even on Twitter that do this and just like tag the first one and then go with thread by thread and just document it. So you can find those resources. I think Edge 21 is also doing that. There are a bunch of other ones that I cannot recall by heart now, but it's actually really, really cool because they provide a service that's needed. They also drive traffic to my podcast. So it's basically a win-win situation for everyone involved.
Fantastic. And now we're going to listen to that episode about Nash potentially being Satoshi.
Nash, yeah.
I mean, that's really at the end of the day, that's what nation state adoption could entail, is the game theory. And that's big. That's what many Bitcoiners talk about, is the potential game theory of what of a G7 country, a massive country like the US, the biggest the superpower of the world, adopting Bitcoin, and you should set off a game theory across the world. But we're not quite seeing that yet. I'm using what the US is doing to speak to some contacts of mine in my region. So within Serbia, within the former Yugoslavia countries, and to try and get them on board, to try and to get them talking about any sort of Bitcoin strategy that could work for them. And it is raising some eyebrows in good ways, which is great, but still very slow. And there will be a point where people will pick up on it, and it's going to really be an acceleration. I think it's just the messaging as well, that Bitcoin is a very good at coming up with good messaging, but it's difficult to try and convince people who are very much stuck in fiat ways that you have great ways of explaining how Bitcoin works, but still it just does not enter yet. So we're still working on techniques of how to improve our messaging and how to make it obvious to people that you really got to adopt Bitcoin. But we'll get there.
It's interesting game theory for me, and I actually wondered how you look at that. We have now America going a clear no to CBDC and kind of clear yes to Bitcoin way. And then we have EU where it's kind of the opposite. So they are not having a clear no to Bitcoin, but they're going with more and more the CBDC route.
Well, because anything that Trump does, they'll do the opposite. So it's like with the war as well, with the Russia-Ukraine conflict. That's, Trump gets voted in on the premise that he's going to create global peace, which is fantastic, I think, because if Trump with Trump's America First plan, it can only work if there's peace around the world. And so he has to promote peace, and that requires getting onto the negotiation table with Russia. But that's obviously pissed off a lot of the so-called hardcore Europeans who are very much into the whole Ukraine conflict and trying to push whatever nonsensical ideology that they're trying to push, which I don't quite get why you want to expand NATO to try and to test Russia. And it's beyond me why people want more war, and it's beyond me why they think that Ukraine can actually take on Russia. And I think Russia doesn't want to have conflict. Russia wants to just get on with business, and Russia has its interest. Europe should be interested in making business with Russia, and Russia is interested in making business with Europe. It's as simple as that. So whoever's pushing for this war, it's obviously they're making money in a different way. And now that they're trying to stop this, that the US is trying to stop this, that Europe are realizing that this is going against some of the interests of the force. So they're pushing something different. And I think anything that America says right now that comes out of the Trump administration, that you're going to see an opposite reaction. So that's why, anti-CBDC America, pro-CBDC Europe, pro-Bitcoin America, anti-Bitcoin Europe. It's just going to have, hopefully that will iron out in the future. But yeah, it's kind of worrying to see. But I think over time, people will start to be a bit more educated about it.
It's also it really bothers me how some politicians say like, oh, like it's bad that Russia is now talking with America. I'm like, why? Like, just because, and they always use the argument of like, oh, Ukraine is not at the table. I'm like, of course they are at the table. Of course they, but not in every conversation. It bothers me how many people want to end the war in their way. Or not at all. Like it has to have that formal way of like, okay, it has to be with European Union, the Ukraine. If we can end the war in one way, that's fine. I think like it's weird
But
how
you made a good
European
point
goes with
that
that.
people are very idealistic about it, and they want to end it in their way. You know, the sort of lefty way, which is not going to please. Look, as you said, we want to end the war, and it's do what it takes to end the war. Not everyone's going to be happy with the solution. Russia not going to be happy, Ukraine not going to be happy, Europe not going to be happy, America not going to be happy. But one thing we'll have to agree on is peace, and that's going to come in ways that not everyone's going to agree on. And yeah, that what you said before, that Ukraine are not on the table. Well, Ukraine are on the negotiation table. They were invited. Zelensky was invited to speak at the White House, and obviously that didn't go too well. That was an interesting conversation, and I think that Zelensky was badly advised. He probably met with some neocon Republicans before that, saying, "Yeah, you got to go hard at Trump." And the first 30 minutes of the conversation was good, was respectable. Trump was going to go see through the deal and going to give aid to Ukraine. But then all of a sudden, someone signaled within the crowd, within Zelensky's staffer, to go out, to basically push Trump on something, and that didn't work out. And JD Vance called him out, and then you saw how the conversation ended up. And then the rest, and then they used that. The established legacy media used that against Trump, against JD Vance, and said that America are going back the incorrect way. But yeah, it's the whole thing is very sad to see. But I'm glad that Trump and Putin recently had a very long phone call, and they're on the same page where we want peace in not just Ukraine but in the Middle East. And it's going to take time. You know, the trust has been lost over the last 4 or 5 years with the Ukraine-Russia relationship, and it's going to take. It's going to probably take about a decade to regain that trust again. But you have to make some uncomfortable steps to start with. And I think Trump is taking those right steps. But it's sad that you see a lot of EU being very warmongering, very 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 neocon-like, and it's terrible, given how much destruction, how many lives have been lost in Ukraine. Some reports are saying that almost 1 million lives have been lost, 1 million soldiers, young men lives have been lost in Ukraine, as well as Russian soldiers. You're saying up to about 100,000, 150,000 Russians have lost as well. So this is a really ugly situation. But anyway, we're not talking about geopolitics. But having said that, geopolitics is Bitcoin does get involved in geopolitics. And we got into this conversation thanks to game theory, thanks to Murray Rudd's and yours podcast about Nash being potentially Satoshi Nakamoto, which is interesting. I look forward to reading that, or at least reading the summary in Rudd's tool that he created.
Yeah, it's super interesting where conversations go. It's also I still do that, and I still have like an outline of like where the conversation could go, but usually after 10, 20 minutes, I completely dismiss it, and the conversation goes somewhere else. But it is something very interesting when we look at game theory. Maybe a different approach to that. People talk about hyper-Bitcoinization, and I think I also heard you talk about that before. How close are we now to that? If you see it, the EU, we are kind of a little bit further away. China also a little bit, but then there's America, there's El Salvador, there's Bhutan. There are a lot of other positive examples of that. How long would you say is that the process is taking?
I think we've seen a lot of companies now, as you said, you talked about before, a lot of Bitcoin only companies springing up, doing great work in furthering the network, expanding the Bitcoin network. And this is what drives adoption is, you get Bitcoin, the token, the price, which is what people get on board. Like I got on board in Bitcoin. I was attracted to the number go up, but then I stayed because I saw the future of a decentralized, scarce money that is Bitcoin. But you start to learn about how Bitcoin is the network as well, and that's growing all the time. And there's a lot of great companies out there start doing a lot of work. And like at Jan 3, we are focusing on nation state adoption and trying to start top down conversations. But we understand that Bitcoin, we understand, is a bottom up strategy, and that's why Samson Mao created Aqua Wallet, which is one way to accelerate hyper Bitcoinization. And we want to bank the billions of people that are unbanked across the world. The one way to do that is by using the technology that we have at hand, which is smartphones, Bitcoin, and USDT as well. And we're seeing that the use of USDT, and I know this is not something that a lot of Bitcoiners are very keen about because USDT works on a lot of shitcoin rails, but USDT also works on Bitcoin, on Liquid. And there's about 400 million or so users of USDT around the world, and sadly they have to use it mainly on shitcoin rails. But we understand that that can be used as a Trojan horse to get people onto Bitcoin. That if you offer a wallet that's not a shitcoin wallet, that's not subject to a lot of these pump and dump scams out there, and just make it Bitcoin only with USDT on Bitcoin Liquid, and they see a good sturdy wallet like that, they will come and use it, and then they will see Bitcoin on there as well, and they will start to use that as a savings account, but also as a transaction account as well. And that's going to be a Trojan horse to more Bitcoin adoption. It's just by using an easy wallet like Aqua and using USDT on it, it's going to help adoption.
So Aqua is a Bitcoin Lightning Liquid USDT wallet.
So Aqua has how Aqua works really is it's designed to give you like the full power of Bitcoin, both on chain and on advanced layer 2 networks like Liquid and Lightning. So you have your layer 1 on chain, which is just normal Bitcoin on chain, and then you have your layer 2, which is Bitcoin on Liquid, and that's your spending account. So that is where you can also transact on the Liquid network, but also it automatically opens up Lightning channels. And then that's also how you spend USDT. So when you look at Aqua, when you have the wallet in front of you, you have your savings account, which is Bitcoin layer 1, and then you have another section, which is your spending account, which is Bitcoin on Liquid and USDT. And you're able to move out from one to another easily using atomic swaps. And it's a very seamless operation, and it works so easy that, like as we said, your grandmother can use it. The fees are when you're using for basically, in short, like Bitcoin layer 1 is like for your long-term storage, high security. You leave your Bitcoin there, but then you want to transact quicker. You then transfer into layer 2, so you work on Bitcoin Liquid, and that also means that you can make transact in Lightning as well. And that's also, you can also transfer into USDT or transfer USDT onto Liquid or onto Bitcoin layer 1. And we do this all very, very all one face, and it's done very easily.
Really interesting. There's so many developments coming in the Bitcoin ecosystem. It's almost hard to keep up with all the tools that are now out there. It's really cool to see. I love that. One thing, because you're from Serbia and we didn't touch on that, I think maybe you touched on it a little bit before, but how is Bitcoin going in Serbia? Like, what is the progress there?
There is a lot of more people coming on board here. A lot of people talking about it here, especially that given that Serbia is very Trump friendly. There was during the U.S. election, there was a graph showing all the European countries how many people would vote for Biden. For Harris, and how many people will vote for Trump. And Serbia had the most Trump voters out of all European countries. So yeah, I think that helps the fact that Trump has made some moves in Bitcoin, because it will help for our case over here. So there's more and more people talking about Bitcoin here, and I see a lot of progress happening. Right now, Serbia is going through an unstable period. There's this massive student-led protests that are very anti-corruption. There was a disaster that happened last November where in Novi Sad, where a train station canopy, outside the train station, collapsed and killed 15 people. And people are associating that with the corruption that the country is going through. So since that, there's been students have created this massive, huge protest against anti-corruption, anti-government protest. And just recently, last weekend, there was the biggest ever protest the country has ever seen, where official numbers are saying 107,000 people, but actual numbers are probably closer to maybe 500, closer to maybe 800,000 people on the streets of Serbia. So that's creating a bit of a tension over here. So when it comes to any nation state adoption stuff over here, things are not going to be moving very quickly. But when it comes to individual adoption, I see more and more of it, and people are talking about it a lot more. And I'm trying to push for private adoption, but also trying to make movements towards geothermal energy adoption, using Bitcoin mining as a way to kickstart geothermal projects. There was maybe 15, 20 years ago, there was some initial efforts made to make Serbia to improve Serbia's geothermal capacity. But given that the high costs of actually drilling these geothermal wells to start with have high costs, that these projects didn't last. But now if you attach Bitcoin mining to it, you can actually bootstrap these projects and get them happening much quicker, because you're able to make money out of it, essentially. And that money, the Bitcoin, can then be used to expand the infrastructure afterwards. So it works well. It's one of the beautiful things about Bitcoin mining is that it can actually further renewable energy, clean energy projects like that. And that's one thing I'm looking into, not just in Serbia, but also in Bosnia and Herzegovina, in the Serbian autonomous part of that, Republika Srpska. There's a lot of geothermal potential in this region. Maybe not to the levels that you see in like Iceland or in El Salvador and places like that, but you do get a lot of hot wells here around 100 degrees, maybe not as that hot, but enough to create electricity and enough to heat homes as well. So it has also other possibilities, not just you can mine Bitcoin out of it, but also to improve energy efficiency, not just through electricity, but also through heating homes. It has so much potential. So I'm trying to introduce that in this region here. And I'm really bullish about that in the next 10 years, that we can get some good projects happening that will improve Serbia's and the region's energy consumption efficiency, while at the same time stacking Bitcoin.
I love that so much. It's almost like when you see all the things currently going on with Bitcoin, and then you see the price of Bitcoin. It's like it feels like an insider trade.
Exactly.
it feels like we are seeing more than the general public is seeing.
But it's just looking at examples like Bhutan and El Salvador. If you use those two as your country to go to countries' case studies, then you can really see how the opportunities are endless, really. And every country has its own energy mix. Some countries are more have more energy capacity than other countries, but every country has some access to energy, and energy is money. So if you're not using that efficiently, and then you're not going to make it, really. So now is the time to move towards these energy efficient strategies, which is basically mining Bitcoin and lowering your costs and stacking money at the same time. It's amazing.
Really cool. Last topic. What do you think will be the impact that Bitcoin will have on those nation states long term?
Sorry, rephrase that.
I'm just wondering, because I think a Bitcoin world will look a lot different than we have the fiat world. We have like the war example that we brought in before. There's a lot of other things happening. And I'm just wondering how a nation state is evolving if they are on a Bitcoin standard. So like more than just, yeah, exactly.
Well, put it this way. I don't think we'll ever see. I find it hard to imagine that anywhere around the world they'll be able to ever introduce a new fiat currency, given that Bitcoin's about. And I think I'm very bullish on that aspect. That now we understand what money is, and any central bank out there would be silly to try and start a fiat currency right now, because that's going to fail at the start. I think now is the time that countries you'll see. I mean, it's how to rephrase this. That if we're on the Bitcoin standard, then I think I don't know how else to say it, but you will see so much improvement within countries that are using Bitcoin not only, but also using Bitcoin to back their fiat currencies. You're going to see so much progression.
That's true. Like that, there will be a lot happening. I'm so interested just in that topic of like how we, on so many different levels, how are we as human civilization, as nation states, as individuals, just like changing because of Bitcoin.
Because there was that one conversation that happened that the BRIC currencies were going to start their own currency. The BRIC countries, were going to start their own currency over the last few years, especially given under the Biden administration, and there was no efforts to make any peace. That they thought the BRIC countries, people were talking about the BRIC countries are going to break away and create their own. They were going to have a much more polarized world in that respect, and that they might even move towards making their own currency. I think that's obviously less of a chance now, but it was always flawed. That any country that wants to start its own reserve, like its own currency right now, it doesn't favor countries, especially if you're a BRIC country that are net exporter of goods. And there's some good Bitcoiners talking about this. Someone, Peruvian Bull was one who mentioned that there's a tripping dilemma happening with countries, with resource-rich countries. If they want to create their own currency, then they would have to export. They would have to import more than export. Given that if you have your own reserve currency, you're going to have to export that currency. So you're going to create inflation. So you're going to have to import more. So it doesn't work out for them. So at the end of the day, that's why America became such a big consumer country, because they had to export dollars, but in order to balance their inflation, they had to import a lot. So it doesn't work out. That's why being a reserve currency is not a really good geopolitical move, I believe. And this is why people, when they study more, they'll end up settling on a decentralized currency, like what gold was for 5,000 years. But now we have Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is just a lot more efficient and practical than gold as a currency.
Yeah, a lot. Yeah. Really cool. We have one question that I ask each and every one of my guests, and the question is, what can we learn from you besides Bitcoin?
Well, given that I'm a prince, I guess I'm going to push for monarchy as a better system, as a better governance system than democracy. But that's another conversation.
I think we went into that a little bit in the first part, like in the first round. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm fairly sure that we covered that a little bit last time. So if people are interested, you can check out the first interview we did with you on this channel. I think there's like a segment in there, like 10-20 minutes, where we actually talked about that topic. If I'm not completely mistaken, maybe we talked about it afterwards, not recorded, but I'm definitely sure that I talked with you already on that topic.
Well, we probably did. One thing maybe I would like to talk about is how important family is for the foundation of civilization. We all talk about Bitcoin, how low time preference. We all understand the concept of low time preference, and given a lot of Bitcoiners are libertarians, I think we have to dive deeper into that and understand that yes, we can be very much individuals, and we like we don't like rulers, but we like rules in that respect. And what I'm trying to get at is like that why family matters, and basically family acts as a sort of a natural pre-political unit that like fosters low time preference, and it helps us understand it helps us value the future over the present. Basically, parents like save and sacrifice for their children, passing down wealth, values, and discipline, and this is what really is fundamental to building strong, stable, productive societies and civilization. And why am I getting to this? Because recently I've just finished completing the book Democracy, The God That Fell by Hans Hermann Hoppe. And there was a lot of insights, a lot of things in that book that I can relate to. And his book it goes under the premise that democracy, that there's three systems out there. There's democracy, monarchy, and natural order. And he says out of all of those, democracy is the most flawed, monarchy is better, and obviously natural order is the way forward. And given that I'm a prince and stuff, I kind of like that. But he talked about, and this is something as what monarchs always tend to advocate for, is strong family values and tradition. And that's one thing I always like to point out. And I think that a lot of instances, like democracy, has a way of like undermining families by replacing the role of the family with the state. You have welfare programs, public education, and all these progressive policies that can keep continuing eroding at parental authority, and they incentivize dependency on the states. And I think it's really important that we go back to being more traditional, more family orientated, because that links nicely with individual property rights, with strong individual property rights. It links strongly with our sense of belonging, our sense of traditional family values. And I think that's really important for a lot of Bitcoiners, that we don't strafe too much at being individuals, that we really have to understand that family is number one. It's what keeps us united as humans, really. I mean,
I love that.
Yeah,
I love that. That's really good, and that's also what I hear a lot about from Bitcoiners. I think this family values and those values are really ingrained in the Bitcoin DNA for some reason.
That's one thing I see is a lot of Bitcoiners having a lot of babies, and more so in my other friends' circles. You know, when you speak to Bitcoiners, they've got like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 babies or something, or kids. It's fantastic to see, because you understand. I mean, that's what Bitcoin is. That's what family is. Family is low time preference. Bitcoiners are very future orientated people, and this is what's beautiful about what I've learned so much becoming a Bitcoiner. And I wasn't so much like that 5, 6 years ago. My son now, he's just turned 7, and but also when I had my son, it also tied into the time when I first discovered about Bitcoin, and it made me much more traditional, much more conservative in a good way. And it turned me towards being more religious, more of a Christian, getting in touch more with my Orthodox roots, and understanding that natural hierarchy is so paramount to a stable society. And this is how we raise responsible adults, individuals, is through family. So yeah, it's something that I've been really touching on recently, and it's really a beautiful subject to see. And I'm just really happy that, that this is something that I've finally found that I feel very comfortable with, and it's made me very calm and very hopeful about the future. And now we have a tool like Bitcoin that helps facilitate this, and it's very paramount to re-civilizing our society that's gone through a huge decivilization process over the last 100 years, since the birth of fiat currencies and all its degeneracy that happens as a result of. And now we're starting to understand, more people waking up to the fact that we need to get back to a hard money standard, and that helps us civilize again.
I love that. That's very beautiful. I think that's also perfect ending for the podcast. We have one more thing, our end routine, where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest actually is. It's a fun question. You probably won't answer it truthfully. The question is, what are your 12 seed words?
That's a good one.
I don't take responsibility for that question.
What's 12 seed words? Okay, that's good. It can be anything, really.
I want to show this to people quickly at the end because I mentioned it before. If people want to hear more about you, we had exactly around about 1 year ago our first conversation. I think it was really good, and we touched on the monarchy part and some of really cool other things. Also, I think we touched on your discovery journey of how you discovered Bitcoin and the shitcoin phase and stuff like that. So that was a fun discussion. If people are still hungry for more content of yours, they can check that out. And yeah, thank you so much, Filip, for being on. Before I let you go, where can people find you, ask you questions, and reach out to you?
You can find me on Twitter at PrincePhilip1. That's PRINCFILIP1. And Jan3com as well on Twitter, Jan3com, and I'm also on Instagram, and Jan3's on Instagram as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Your Twitter account is in the description, and yeah, thank you so much for being on again. Also, thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening, for joining us today. As always, I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Bye bye.